When rain knows your name, some stories begin with sunshine, but the truest ones are born in storms. This is about a woman who learned that survival sometimes wears a stranger's face, and a man who discovered that the walls he built to protect himself could also keep out everything worth living for. The city of Portland wept that October night. Rain hammered the streets in sheets, turning gutters into rivers and sidewalks into mirrors reflecting neon signs and broken dreams. Claire Bennett stood under the awning of a closed bookstore, her breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. 3 months. That's how long it had been since she'd walked away from Marcus. 3 months of changing her number twice, of checking every shadow, of jumping at footsteps that sounded too familiar. Love had taught her many things, but the hardest lesson was this. Sometimes the person who promises to protect becomes the very thing you need protection from. Her clothes clung to her skin, soaked through from running. The grocery bag she'd been carrying had torn 2 blocks back, spilling its contents across the wet pavement. She'd left it all behind, just like she'd left behind so many pieces of herself over the past year. A single thought pulsed through her mind with every heartbeat. Keep moving, keep breathing, keep surviving. The sound of a car engine made her press herself against the storefront glass. Headlights swept past, illuminating the rain like thousands of falling stars. Not him. Not yet. But she knew he was out there, searching. Marcus had always been persistent. It was one of the things she'd loved about him once, back when his attention felt like devotion instead of surveillance. Claire's fingers trembled as she pushed wet hair from her face. She was 26 years old, and she felt ancient. Working 3 jobs barely kept her and her younger brother afloat. Danny was 17, still in high school, still believing the world could be kind if you were kind to it first. She couldn't let Marcus find her, couldn't risk leading that darkness back to the only family she had left. Across the street, light spilled from tall windows. The Ashford Hotel rose like a fortress of glass and steel, its lobby glowing with the warmth of a world she'd never belonged to. A banner hung above the entrance. Annual charity gala, benefiting youth education programs. People in elegant evening wear moved through the revolving doors, laughing, shaking rain from expensive umbrellas. Utterly unaware of the girl watching from the shadows, her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. The message made her stomach twist. I can see you, Claire. Stop running. We need to talk. Her head snapped up, eyes scanning the street. Where was he? Every parked car became a threat. Every darkened doorway held possibility of danger. Her heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Then she saw him. Marcus stood beneath a streetlight half a block away, rain streaming off his jacket. Even from this distance, she could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. He was angry. He was always angry now. Claire didn't think. She ran, her shoes slapped against wet concrete as she sprinted toward the only refuge she could see. The hotel steps seemed impossibly tall, but adrenaline carried her up them 2 at a time. A doorman started to step forward, concern crossing his face as he took in her soaked appearance. But she was already pushing through the revolving door, stumbling into warmth and light and the overwhelming scent of lilies. The lobby stretched before her like something from a dream. Marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers. Men in tuxedos and women in flowing gowns moved through the space with effortless grace, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. A string quartet played somewhere nearby, the music soft and achingly beautiful. Claire stood frozen just inside the entrance, water pooling at her feet. She was painfully aware of her thrift store jeans, her faded jacket, her sneakers that squelched with every breath. A few people turned to look, their expressions shifting from curiosity to subtle judgment. She needed to blend in, to disappear into this golden world long enough for Marcus to give up and leave. Her eyes darted around the lobby, searching for somewhere to hide. A hallway to the right led deeper into the hotel. Service corridors, maybe bathrooms. Anywhere but here, exposed and obvious. But before she could move, a man's voice cut through the ambient noise, sharp and familiar. Claire? Marcus stood in the doorway behind her, rain dripping from his hair. Security guards began moving toward him, but he ignored them, his eyes locked on her. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The room fell quiet. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The quartet's music faltered and died. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see what would happen next. Claire's vision tunneled. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The walls seemed to press in from all sides, even though the lobby was vast enough to hold 100 people. She took a step backward, then another, and collided with something solid. Hands steadied her, gentle but firm. A voice spoke near her ear, low and calm. "Easy, I've got you." She turned and looked up into the face of a stranger. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. His tuxedo fit him perfectly. Speaking of money and power and a life lived far from the kind of fear that had become her constant companion. But it was his expression that stopped her. Not pity, not confusion, just steady presence. "Play along," she whispered desperately. "Please." He didn't ask why, didn't hesitate. His hand moved to the small of her back, protective and sure. When Marcus took another step forward, pushing past a security guard, the stranger turned slightly, placing himself between them. "Is there a problem?" His voice carried authority that made even Marcus's pause. "This doesn't concern you," Marcus spat. "Claire, come on. Stop being dramatic." The stranger's expression didn't change. "I think the lady has made her choice." Something shifted in the air. Claire felt it, like the moment before lightning strikes. She looked up at the man who was shielding her. The stranger who had decided without question to stand between her and harm, and made a decision that would change everything. She reached up, fingers curling into the lapels of his tuxedo, and pulled him down into a kiss. The lobby erupted in gasps and whispers. Somewhere, a woman laughed in delight. The quartet, perhaps sensing a shift in the story, began to play again, a sweeping romantic melody that felt almost mocking in its perfection. But Claire barely heard any of it. All she knew was the warmth of his mouth against hers, the steadiness of his hands as they settled on her waist, the way his presence made her feel, just for a moment, like she could stop running. When they finally broke apart, she kept her eyes closed, afraid to see his reaction. Afraid to see Marcus? Afraid to face what she'd just done, the stranger murmured, his breath warm against her temple. "That's one way to make an impression. Despite everything." Despite the fear and exhaustion and desperation, Claire felt the smallest smile tug at her lips. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that this moment, born of panic and rain and a stranger's unexpected kindness, was going to matter more than she could possibly imagine. The storm outside continued to rage. But inside the Ashford Hotel, something else had begun. Something that would test them both in ways they couldn't yet understand. Some stories begin with sunshine, but the truest ones are born in storms. And this storm was only just beginning. The weight of pretending the security guards moved with quiet efficiency, escorting Marcus toward the exit while he shouted protests that echoed off the marble walls. Claire watched him go, her heart still racing, her hands still gripping the stranger's jacket. She couldn't seem to let go. "Breathe," the man said softly. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue. She released him slowly, stepping back, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes still watching them. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and something else she couldn't name. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have done that. I didn't know what else to do." He studied her for a moment, his gray eyes taking in her soaked clothes, her trembling hands. The exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "What's your name, Claire?" "Claire Bennett. I'm Owen." He paused, then added, "Owen Harriston." The name meant nothing to her, but the way people around them reacted suggested it should have. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Someone nearby muttered something about the Harriston Foundation. Another voice mentioned real estate empire. Claire felt suddenly smaller than ever. "I should go," she said, glancing toward the exit. "Thank you for helping me. I'll just slip out the back," and he's still out there. Owen's voice was gentle but firm. "I saw him through the window. He's waiting by the corner." Claire's stomach dropped. Of course Marcus was waiting. He always waited. He had patience when it came to her, the kind of patience that felt like a noose slowly tightening. Owen seemed to make a decision. "Come with me. There's a private room upstairs where you can catch your breath. Figure out your next move." "I can't. I don't belong here. Look at me." She gestured at her soaked clothes, her ruined shoes. "You belong wherever you choose to be." Something in his tone made her look up. His expression was earnest, without a trace of the judgment she'd been expecting. And right now, choosing to be somewhere safe seems like a good idea. Before she could argue, a woman in a sleek black dress approached them. She was probably in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot and eyes that missed nothing. "Owen, darling," she said, her gaze flicking between them with barely concealed curiosity. "Are you going to introduce me to your mysterious companion?" "Aunt Patricia, this is Claire Bennett." "Claire, this is Patricia Harriston, the organizer of tonight's event." Patricia's smile was warm but calculating. "How wonderful. I wasn't aware Owen was bringing someone tonight." "You're quite the surprise, my dear." Claire opened her mouth to explain. To confess that she'd crashed the party and imposed on Owen's kindness, but he spoke first. "Claire and I have been keeping things private. You know how the media can be." His hand found the small of her back again, the gesture looking natural, practiced. "I hope you don't mind that I didn't mention her on the RSVP. My nonsense? Any friend of Owen's is welcome. Though I must say your entrance was quite dramatic, very romantic." The knowing look in her eyes made Claire's face flame. The kiss. Everyone had seen the kiss. "We should let you get back to your guests," Owen said smoothly. "I'm going to get Claire something dry to wear." Of course, of course." Patricia patted his arm. "Do join us for dinner, though. I've seated you at table 3. I'll have a place setting added for Claire." As Patricia glided away, Claire turned to Owen. "You didn't have to lie for me." "I didn't lie. I said we've been keeping things private, which is technically true since no one knew you existed in my life until 10 minutes ago." A small smile played at his lips. "And now everyone thinks we're together. That should keep your ex at a distance, at least for tonight. But I've put you in an impossible position. What happens when people start asking questions? When they want to know how we met or how long we've been dating? Then we'll answer them." Owen gestured toward the elevator. "Come on. Let's get you sorted out first, then we'll worry about the rest." Claire followed him, her mind spinning. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in a small space that smelled of expensive cologne and fresh flowers. She caught sight of herself in the mirrored wall and winced. Her hair hung in wet tangles, her makeup had run, leaving dark smudges under her eyes. And her jeans had a tear in one knee she hadn't noticed before. "I look like a disaster," she said quietly. "You look like someone who's been through something difficult." Owen's reflection met hers in the mirror. "There's a difference." The elevator opened onto a quiet hallway carpeted in deep burgundy. Owen led her to a door near the end, pulling a keycard from his pocket. The room beyond was more of a suite, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, elegant furniture that looked both comfortable and expensive, and a bedroom visible through an open doorway. "This is where I stay when I'm in town for events," Owen explained. "The bathroom is through there. Take your time. I'll see what I can do about finding you something to wear." Claire stood in the center of the room, feeling utterly out of place. "Why are you doing this?" He paused near the door, his hand on the frame. "Because once upon a time, someone helped me when I needed it. And because no one should have to be afraid like you were down there." There was a story in those words, something painful and personal, but before Claire could ask, he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city spread out in a grid of lights and shadows. Somewhere down there, Marcus was waiting. Somewhere out there, her brother was probably worrying why she hadn't come home yet. And here she was, standing in a luxury hotel suite. Having just kissed a stranger in front of Portland's elite, her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket with shaking hands. Danny's name flashed on the screen. Claire, where are you? You said you'd be home by 8. I'm sorry, Danny. Something came up. I'm okay, though. I'll be home soon. Is it him? Is it Marcus? Her brother's voice tightened with worry. Claire, you need to call the police.
I will.
I promise. Just stay inside, okay? Keep the doors locked. You'll always say you'll call the police. But you never do. This time is different. She hoped that was true. After they hung up, Claire stood holding the phone, staring at the screen. 15 missed calls from Marcus, 23 text messages. Each one escalating from apologies to anger to threats thinly veiled as concern. She deleted them all and turned the phone off. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures. Claire peeled off her wet clothes and stood under the shower, letting hot water wash away the cold, the fear, the feeling of Marcus's eyes following her through the streets. She stayed there until her skin turned pink and the mirror fogged completely. When she emerged wrapped in a plush robe, she found a dress laid out on the bed. It was simple but beautiful, deep navy blue with a flowing skirt and delicate beading along the neckline. A note lay beside it in confident handwriting. This belonged to my sister. She would have wanted someone to wear it. Owen. The dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Claire stared at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back. She looked elegant, put together, like someone who belonged at a charity gala instead of someone who served coffee for minimum wage. A knock at the door made her jump. Owen entered, now wearing a fresh shirt, his hair slightly damp, as if he, too, had taken a moment to compose himself. Much better, he said with approval. How are you feeling? Like I'm living someone else's life. Claire smoothed the skirt nervously. Your sister has excellent taste. Had. The correction was gentle but firm. She passed away 2 years ago. Oh, Owen, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't be wearing this then, please. She would have loved knowing it was being worn again. Emma was always trying to help people. She volunteered at shelters, organized food drives, spent her weekends tutoring kids who couldn't afford private lessons. His smile was sad. You remind me of her, actually. That same quiet strength. Claire didn't feel strong. She felt like she was barely holding herself together with tape and hope. But something in Owen's expression made her nod instead of arguing, so he said, Here's what I'm thinking. We go downstairs, attend the dinner, let people see us together. That establishes our story. Then tomorrow, we can figure out a longer-term solution to your situation. Tomorrow? I can't ask you to keep helping me. You're not asking. I'm offering. Owen met her eyes steadily. Look, I don't know your whole story yet, and you don't have to tell me if you're not ready. But I saw the fear in your eyes down there, and I saw the way that man looked at you. Whatever's going on, you shouldn't have to face it alone. The tears pricked at Claire's eyes. When was the last time someone had offered help without expecting something in return? When had kindness become so foreign? Okay, she whispered. Okay, but just for tonight. Tomorrow, I'll figure something else out. Tomorrow, we'll figure something out, Owen corrected gently. Together, the word wrapped around her like a promise, warm and unexpected. Together. She'd been alone for so long she'd forgotten what that word could mean. They took the elevator, back down to the ballroom. The gala was in full swing now, guests seated at round tables draped in white linen. Candlelight flickering across faces flushed with wine and conversation. The quartet had been replaced by a small band playing jazz standards. Heads turned as they entered. Claire felt the weight of every gaze, heard the whispers that followed them like a wake. But Owen's hand remained steady on her back, guiding her through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd navigated these waters his entire life. Their table was near the front, occupied by people whose names Claire vaguely recognized from news articles and charity event announcements. Patricia Harriston waved them over enthusiastically. There you are. Everyone, this is Claire Bennett, Owen's guest this evening. Claire, let me introduce you to some dear friends. The introductions blurred together. Claire smiled and nodded, trying to remember names and faces while her mind raced with the absurdity of her situation. 12 hours ago, she'd been wiping down coffee shop tables. Now she was seated among Portland's philanthropic elite. pretending to be someone she wasn't. Dinner was served in courses, each plate a work of art that seemed too beautiful to eat. Claire picked at her food, hyper-aware of using the right fork, of sitting up straight, of not doing anything that would expose her as the fraud she felt like. "So Claire," said a woman across the table, her diamond necklace catching the candlelight, "what do you do?" The question she'd been dreading. Claire's mind went blank. "Claire works in education," Owen said smoothly before she could stumble through an answer. "Youth outreach programs, helping at-risk kids. It's how we met, actually. I was touring one of the Foundation's partner organizations." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily it almost sounded true. Claire followed his lead, nodding along as he wove a story about their first meeting. About shared passions for helping others. About keeping their relationship quiet because they both valued privacy. He was good at this, she realized. Good at reading the room, at saying exactly what people wanted to hear. It should have made her uncomfortable, but instead, she felt grateful. He was building them a shelter made of words. A place where she could hide until she figured out what came next. As dinner wound down and guests began moving toward the dance floor, Patricia appeared at Owen's elbow. "Dance with your lovely lady," she commanded with a smile. "Everyone will expect it after that entrance." Owen stood, offering his hand to Claire. "Shall we?" Her heart hammered as they walked to the dance floor. She hadn't danced in years, not since before Marcus, before her world had shrunk to survival and fear. "I don't really know how," she admitted, as Owen's hand found her waist. "Just follow my lead, and try to look like you're enjoying yourself." His smile was gentle. "We're supposed to be madly in love, remember?" The band shifted to a slower song, something old and romantic. Owen guided her into the rhythm, his movements easy and assured. Claire concentrated on not stepping on his feet, on matching his steps, on pretending this was normal. "Relax," he murmured. "You're doing fine. Everyone's watching us. Let them watch. Let them see exactly what we want them to see. A couple who can't take their eyes off each other." Claire looked up at him then, really looked. In the soft light, with music swirling around them, it was easy to imagine this was real. Easy to pretend she was someone else, someone whose life hadn't been torn apart by loving the wrong person. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I know this is all pretend, but it means more than you know." Something flickered in Owen's expression, too quick to read. "What if it doesn't have to be entirely pretend?" "What do you mean?" "I mean you need help. Protection from your ex. A safe place to stay until you figure things out. And I could use someone in my life who's real, who doesn't want something from me beyond basic human kindness." Claire's breath caught. "You're suggesting we keep up this charade? For how long?" "As long as it takes. A few weeks, maybe a month. Long enough for your ex to move on, for you to get on your feet." We'd set ground rules, of course. Boundaries. This would be a business arrangement, nothing more. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Owen was quiet for a moment, guiding her through a turn. "My sister Emma, she was in a relationship like yours. The guy seemed perfect at first. Charming, attentive. Then he became controlling, jealous. By the time we realized how bad it was, she was terrified to leave. What happened? We got her out. Set her up in a safe house, got restraining orders, did everything right. She was free for almost a year. Was starting to smile again, starting to believe she could have a normal life." His voice dropped. "Then he found her. Broke into her apartment one night. By the time the police arrived, it was too late." "Owen." Claire's eyes burned with tears. "I'm so sorry. I made a promise at her funeral, that if I ever had the chance to help someone in her situation, I would. No questions asked, no hesitation. So when I saw you tonight, when I saw that fear in your eyes, I knew this was my chance to keep that promise." They swayed in silence, the music washing over them. Claire's mind raced. It was crazy, what he was suggesting. Pretending to be in a relationship with a man she'd just met, moving into his world, lying to everyone. But was it any crazier than going home to her tiny apartment where Marcus knew the address, where he could show up any time he wanted? "There would be rules," she said finally. "Clear boundaries, of course. I'd pay you back somehow. Once I get on my feet, I'll know money. I don't need it, and that's not what this is about. Then what do you get out of it? Owen smiled slightly. Peace of mind. And maybe a friend. God knows I could use one of those. Song ended. Around them, couples pulled apart, applauding the band. But Claire and Owen stood still, locked in a moment that felt heavier than it should. Okay, Claire heard herself say. Okay, let's do it. But just until I figure something else out. Just until you figure something else out. Owen agreed. Neither of them mentioned that some temporary arrangements had a way of becoming permanent. Neither of them acknowledged, small voice whispering that this might be the beginning of something neither of them expected. They shook hands formally, sealing their strange agreement, and somewhere in the back of Claire's mind, she wondered if she'd just made the best decision of her life or the biggest mistake. Only time would tell. When lies become truth. First week living with Owen felt like stepping into a play where Claire had been given the script 5 minutes before curtain call. His penthouse apartment overlooked the Willamette River, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. It probably cost more than she'd earned in the past 3 years combined. He'd given her the guest room, which was larger than the entire apartment she shared with Danny. Her brother had been skeptical. When she'd called to explain her new arrangement, leaving out most of the truth and focusing on the opportunity Owen was offering her to work as his personal assistant, it wasn't entirely a lie. Owen had suggested the cover story himself, even going so far as to set up a legitimate position with a salary that made Claire's head spin. You'll need spending money, he'd explained when she protested. And a paper trail, in case anyone asks questions. Besides, you'll actually be helping me. I'm terrible at managing my schedule. That turned out to be true. Owen was brilliant with investments and business strategy, but hopeless at remembering appointments or answering emails. Within days, Claire had organized his calendar, set up systems for his correspondence, and even renegotiated a contract with one of his vendors that saved the foundation $20,000. Where have you been all my life? Owen asked one morning as she handed him his coffee exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. Poured into his favorite mug, surviving, Claire answered without thinking. Then immediately wished she could take it back. But Owen just nodded, understanding flickering in his gray eyes. Well, you're doing more than surviving now. You're excelling. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. She'd grown used to being invisible, to having her efforts go unnoticed. Having someone see her, really see her, felt like standing in sunlight after years in shadow. Their public appearances followed a careful pattern. Dinner at upscale restaurants where Owen knew they'd be photographed. Gallery openings where they'd stand close, his hand resting naturally at her waist. Charity events where they'd dance and laugh, play their part so well that Claire sometimes forgot it wasn't real. The Portland Society pages ate it up. Owen Harriston's Mystery Woman Revealed ran one headline, accompanied by a photo of them at a waterfront gala. Claire barely recognized herself in the picture. She was wearing a dress Owen had insisted on buying her. Her hair professionally styled, her smile looking genuine because in that moment, it had been. But it was the quiet moments that surprised her most. Saturday mornings, when Owen made pancakes and they'd eat on the balcony, reading the newspaper and not talking. Evenings, when he'd find her curled up with a book and simply sit nearby. Working on his laptop, their comfortable silence speaking volumes. The night she'd woken from a nightmare about Marcus and found Owen already at her door, asking if she needed anything, his concern written plainly across his face. I'm fine, she'd insisted, wrapping her arms around herself. Just a bad dream. You don't have to be fine all the time, you know. Owen leaned against the doorframe, his expression soft. Not with me. Those words had stayed with her, echoing in the quiet spaces of her mind. She'd spent so long pretending to be fine, first for Marcus, then for Danny, then for herself. The idea that she could simply be human, messy, and scared and imperfect felt revolutionary. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Patricia Harriston invited them to a family dinner at her estate. Owen tensed when he saw the invitation, his usual composure slipping for just a moment. We don't have to go, he said. I can make an excuse. No, we should. It would look strange if we didn't. Claire studied his face. Unless there's a reason you don't want me there, it's not that. Family dinners with Patricia can be intense. She means well, but she has a way of seeing through people. And she loved Emma. She'd probably ask a lot of questions about you, about us. Then we'll answer them. Together, remember? Owen smiled at the echo of his own words. Together, the Harriston estate sat in the West Hills. Sprawling property with manicured gardens and a house that looked like it belonged in an English countryside novel. Patricia greeted them at the door, pulling Owen into a warm embrace before turning to Claire. My dear, it's so wonderful to have you here properly. Come in. Come in. Everyone's dying to meet you officially. Everyone turned out to be a dozen family members and close friends, all curious about the woman who'd captured Owen Harriston's notoriously guarded heart. Claire shook hands and smiled until her face ached, trying to keep names and relationships straight while fielding questions about her background, her work, her intentions toward Owen, said an older gentleman who introduced himself as Owen's Uncle Robert. We were beginning to think Owen would never settle down. After Emma passed, he threw himself into work. Wouldn't let anyone close. Then suddenly, here you are. Here I am, Claire agreed, unsure what else to say. Tell me, how did you really meet? Owen's been rather vague on the details. Claire felt Owen tense beside her. They'd rehearsed their story, but somehow, under Uncle Robert's shrewd gaze, the lies felt heavier. I was volunteering at a youth center in southeast Portland, she began, sticking as close to the truth as possible. Owen came to tour the facility, and we started talking about the programs we were running. He had some ideas, I had some ideas, and the conversation just kept going. We ended up talking for 3 hours that first day. What drew you to each other? Claire looked at Owen and found him already looking at her. In that moment, with his family watching and the lie sitting between them, she surprised herself by speaking a truth she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. He sees people, really sees them. Not who they're supposed to be or who they're pretending to be, but who they actually are. That's rare. Something shifted in Owen's expression. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. She reminds me that there's more to life than business strategies and foundation meetings, he said quietly. She reminds me to be human. The words hung in the air, and Claire realized with a start that they weren't performing anymore. Somewhere between the rehearsed dinners and staged photographs and comfortable silences, something real had taken root. Patricia watched them with knowing eyes, a small smile playing at her lips. Well, she said, I think we should eat. Claire, you must tell me more about your work at the youth center. I'm always looking for new programs to support. Dinner was a boisterous affair, with multiple conversations overlapping and laughter ringing off the high ceilings. Claire found herself relaxing despite her earlier nerves. Drawn into discussions about education reform and nonprofit management, these people weren't so different from the volunteers she worked with, just with bigger bank accounts and fancier dining rooms, after dessert. Patricia pulled Claire aside while Owen was occupied with his cousins. Walk with me, dear. I want to show you the garden. They strolled through pathways lined with roses just beginning their autumn bloom. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and flowers. Owen seems different since he met you, Patricia said without preamble. Lighter somehow. More like himself. I don't know if I can take credit for that. Don't sell yourself short. I watched him after Emma died. It was like someone had turned off a light inside him. He functioned, ran the business, fulfilled his obligations, but there was no joy, no spark. Patricia stopped beside a fountain, its water catching the last rays of sunset. Now when he looks at you, the light is back. Claire's throat tightened. Patricia, I need to tell you something. That this started as a convenient arrangement? That you came into his life running from something and he offered you shelter? Patricia's smile was gentle. My dear, I've been managing Portland society for 40 years. I know a performance when I see one. What I also know is that the best relationships often start in unexpected ways. You know? Does everyone know? I suspect. But what matters isn't how it started, it's what it's becoming. The question is whether you both are brave enough to admit it. They walked back to the house in contemplative silence. Claire's mind raced, replaying moments from the past 3 weeks, re-examining them through this new lens. The way her heart jumped when Owen smiled at her across the breakfast table. How safe she felt when he was nearby. The disappointment she felt on the rare evenings he had business dinners without her, when had pretending stopped feeling like pretending. That night, as Owen drove them home through rain-slicked streets, Claire finally broke the silence. Your family is wonderful. They liked you. Uncle Robert especially, and he's usually impossible to impress. Patricia pulled me aside. She knows Owen. She knows this started as an arrangement. Owen's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did she say? She asked if we were brave enough to admit what it's becoming. The car slowed, pulling to the curb near a small park. Owen shifted into park, but didn't turn off the engine. Just sat there watching rain stream down the windshield. Claire, I need to tell you something. These past few weeks, they've been some of the best I've had in years. Coming home knowing you'll be there talking to you about my day, hearing about yours, it's made me realize how lonely I'd been. How much I'd been just going through the motions. Let me finish. I know we said this was temporary, a business arrangement with clear boundaries. But somewhere along the way, those boundaries started to blur for me. I find myself looking forward to seeing you, not because we have an event to attend, but just because you make everything better. And I need to know if I'm alone in feeling that. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment where everything changed, where they stepped off the cliff together or retreated to safe ground. You're not alone, she whispered. I feel it too. I keep telling myself it's just gratitude, that I'm confusing safety with something else. But then you do something small. Like remember how I take my coffee or leave notes on books you think I'd like, and I realize it's more than that. It's you. Owen turned to face her fully. So what do we do? I don't know. This wasn't supposed to happen. I'm still dealing with the Marcus situation. I'm still figuring out my life. I'm a mess, Owen. You deserve someone who has it all together. I don't want someone who has it all together. I want someone real. Someone who's brave enough to keep going even when everything falls apart. Someone like you. The words broke something open inside her. Before she could overthink it, Claire leaned across the console and kissed him. Not like that first desperate kiss in the hotel lobby, but softly, deliberately. Full of possibility and hope and 100 unspoken promises. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. We're really doing this? Making this real? I think we already did. We just needed to admit it. They sat there in the idling car, rain drumming on the roof, and let the truth settle over them. What had started as pretend, as a desperate solution to desperate circumstances, had transformed into something neither of them expected but both desperately needed. The following weeks unfolded like a dream Claire was afraid to wake from. They continued attending events, but now, when Owen's hand found hers, it was because he wanted to hold it, not because cameras were watching. They still slept in separate rooms, taking things slowly, building a foundation of trust and friendship before adding anything else. Danny finally met Owen over Sunday brunch, eyeing him suspiciously before grudgingly admitting he seemed decent. Claire worked during the days, officially as Owen's assistant, but increasingly taking on more responsibility at the Harriston Foundation. Developing programs she'd only dreamed about before, Marcus tried calling a few times. But each time Owen's security team intercepted him before he could get close. Eventually the calls stopped. Claire heard through a friend that he'd moved to Seattle for a job opportunity. She should have felt relieved. But mostly she just felt sad for the girl she'd been who thought his attention meant love. One evening, almost 2 months after that first rainy night, Owen found Claire on the balcony watching the city lights. Any for your thoughts? I was thinking about Emma, about how she would have handled all this better than me. She probably wouldn't have needed rescuing in the first place. Owen settled beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Emma was brave in her own way, but she struggled too. That's what makes courage real, doing the hard thing even when you're terrified. You did that, Claire. You ran toward the one lit door in a storm, and you kept going, even when it would have been easier to give up. I had help. We all need help sometimes. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Claire leaned into him, fitting against his side, like she'd been made for that exact space. "I love you," she said quietly, testing the words, finding them true. "I don't know when it happened exactly, somewhere between the fake smiles and real conversations. But I do. I love you." Owen turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I love you too. And it's not because you needed saving or because I needed a project. It's because you're brilliant and brave, and you make me want to be better. It's because you've seen me at my worst, my most controlling and overprotective, and you still choose to be here. Always," Claire promised, and meant it. Their kiss was interrupted by Owen's phone buzzing. He groaned, checking the message. "It's Patricia. She's planned an engagement party. We're not engaged. Not yet." Owen's smile was mischievous. "But I've been thinking about it. Would that be crazy? We've only been really together for a few months. We've been living together for 3 months and friends for even longer. I know how you take your coffee and which side of the bed you prefer, and that you secretly watch cooking shows at midnight when you can't sleep. I know you have nightmares about Emma, and that you always check the locks twice before bed. I know your tells when you're stressed and the exact tone of voice that means you need space. Is that a yes? Ask me properly and find out." Owen laughed, pulling her close again. "Give me a week to do it right. I want to plan something special," he proposed a week later on the anniversary of the night they met. Taking her back to the Ashford Hotel, they stood in the same lobby where she'd stumbled in, soaked and terrified, where a stranger had become her shelter and then her home. "Claire Bennett, you walked into my life in a storm and brought sunshine I didn't know I needed. Will you marry me?" She said yes before he'd even finished asking, tears streaming down her face as he slid a ring onto her finger. The wedding happened 6 months later in Patricia's garden. Surrounded by the people who'd watched their unlikely love story unfold, Danny walked her down the aisle, whispering that he was proud of her for choosing happiness after so much pain. As Claire stood facing Owen, promising forever to the man who'd first been her refuge and then her choice, she thought about that rainy night, about how sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones, about how courage looks like running toward a lighted door, about how love, real love, is built in the quiet moments between grand gestures. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and Owen kissed her like he'd never stop. Like this was just the beginning of a story they'd spend their lives writing together, and it was. Years later, when people asked how they met, Claire and Owen would smile and say it was at a charity gala. They'd mention the rain and the dramatic entrance and leave out most of the painful parts. But late at night, when it was just the two of them, they'd remember the whole truth. How she'd been running and he'd been hiding, and somehow they'd found each other in the chaos. They'd remember that love doesn't always arrive wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it shows up soaked and terrified, asking for help. Sometimes it wears a tuxedo and offers shelter without asking for anything in return. Sometimes it starts with pretending and ends with the most honest thing you've ever felt. Claire Bennett Harriston. Learn that survival is just the first step. The real work comes after, choosing to trust again, to hope again, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. And Owen learned that saving someone isn't about being a hero. It's about showing up, about creating space for healing, about loving someone enough to let them save themselves while standing beside them. Together, they learned that some stories begin in storms, but the best ones end in sunshine. The Harriston Foundation expanded its programs significantly after Claire came on board, focusing particularly on supporting survivors of domestic violence. They opened safe houses, funded legal aid, and created job training programs. Every person they helped was a promise kept to Emma, a way of making sure her story led to more happy endings. Claire still had hard days. Moments when a stranger's cologne reminded her of Marcus or when sudden loud noises made her flinch. But Owen was always there, patient and understanding, reminding her that healing isn't linear and love doesn't require perfection. Danny graduated high school with honors and went on to study social work. Inspired by his sister's transformation and wanting to help others find their own way out of darkness, he and Owen became genuinely close, bonding over their shared love for Claire and terrible jokes that made her roll her eyes.